Hey there, movie fans. Scott Movie Mantz here with my brand new show, my very first show. The show is called Rank and File. On each episode, I'm going to take all the films in a particular film series and I'm going to rank them all. What better film series to start with than, of course, the Star Trek movies. So let's get right to it with number 13 on the list, Star Trek NEMESIS. It came out on December 13th, 2002, cost $60 million to make, domestic gross $43 million, worldwide gross $67.3 million, Rotten Tomatoes score 63%. This is the lowest grossing Trek movie of them all, and it really is the worst Trek movie of them all. It was so dull and uninspired and the same old, and it was really time for big changes in the Star Trek world, not just the feature films, but the TV shows as well. Moving on to number 12 on the list of Star Trek movies. The 12th movie here is Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Yes, I know, not very surprising here. Directed by William Shatner. Release date was June 9th, 1989. Cost $33 million to make. Domestic gross was $52 million. Here's the thing. So it won, are you ready for this? Three Razzie Awards. Worst actor for William Shatner, worst director for William Shatner, and worst picture. But wait, there's more. 3 more Razzie nominations. Worst supporting actor for DeForest Kelley. Aw, D. Kelly. Worst screenplay and worst picture of the decade. Ouch. But, this movie does kind of deserve it. It just... After Star Trek IV, which was so great and tapped into everything that was great about Star Trek, Leonard Nimoy directed a great film. The character dynamic was just great. It was metaphorical. It had something to say. And to follow that up with this, I remember when I first saw this movie in Northeast Philadelphia at the GCC Northeast Cinema on opening day, June 9th, I was very upset. I was very depressed. It was just too jokey, too campy. The visual effects weren't very good. Now, here's the way I look at The Final Frontier. The Final Frontier is the Spock's brain of the Star Trek movies. I think that about sums it up. Moving on to number 11, Star Trek INSURRECTION, Next Generation movie, came out December 18th, 1998, directed by Jonathan Frakes, cost $70 million to make, domestic gross $70 million, and worldwide gross $112.6 million. Rotten Tomatoes score is 55%. The thing about Insurrection, is it a bad movie? No. Is it a good movie? Not really. The problem with Insurrection is that it just feels too much like an average, dull episode of Next Generation. And if you're going to take an average, dull TV episode and put it on the big screen, the results are going to be even worse. Number 10, we have Star Trek Generations, directed by David Carson, released on November 18th, 1994, cost $35 million to make, domestic gross $75.7 million. Rotten Tomatoes score is 50%. They started filming this movie as soon as they finished wrapping the 7th and final season of the Next Generation TV series. And that last episode of Next Generation, All Good Things, if you ask me and if you ask a lot of fans, they'll tell you that All Good Things should have been the Star Trek Next Generation feature film. But as it was, Generations, it too felt like a TV episode. David Carson directed a bunch of Next Generations, including Yesterday's Enterprise, which is one of the best Star Trek episodes ever made. The first part, the beginning, and the last part are the best parts of the movie. And why? That's right. William Shatner saved this movie. His chemistry with Patrick Stewart was also very terrific. But the middle part of that movie, it just felt very subpar. It felt like a TV episode. It did not feel cinematic enough. The other thing I had a problem with in this movie was, Kirk has survived worse over the years, especially in the original series. So I just felt like his death, that was the best they could do. He deserved a better send-off. Next Generation movie, the first one out of the door, it was fine. A movie, I don't really go back and watch it a whole lot unless I'm watching the beginning of the film or the end of the movie. Moving on to number 9 on the list. It's going to be a little controversial discussing this one because it is Star Trek Into Darkness. Oh, okay. Directed by J.J. Abrams. Came out on May 16, 2013. Cost $190 million to make. It's the most expensive Star Trek movie ever made. Domestic gross was $229 million. Worldwide gross was $467 million, making it the highest grossing Star Trek movie worldwide of them all. Rotten Tomatoes score is 84%. So people liked it, critics liked it, the fans didn't like it, and I get it. This movie has 1 Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. It's a good action movie, but it's not a great Star Trek movie. You know, after Star Trek 2009 did such a great job of rebooting Star Trek on the big screen and setting up an alternate timeline, which was a brilliant move to free Star Trek from all the canon from all 43 years. So now you have a story that's basically a redo of The Wrath of Khan, and the last 20 minutes of the movie, I hated it. You know, when Spock screamed Khan, I remember I sunk back in my chair and I just cringed. I hated that moment. And I just felt like the sky was the limit. The filmmakers, they could have done anything they wanted to. So what do? They go back and they remake Wrath of Khan? No way. You know, you don't go back and remake Citizen Kane. You don't go back and remake The Wrath of Khan. It just wasn't the right move. But the thing about Into Darkness is I like the characters. I like the actors playing them, like Zachary Quinto, Chris Pine, Zoe Saldana. I really like this cast. I really like the dynamic with the cast. It is the movie's saving grace. I think the movie's a lot of fun as an action movie. It's just not a great Star Trek movie, but it did have a great score by Michael Giacchino. All right. Really curious to hear what you think of my ranking for Star Trek Into Darkness. Comment below in the YouTube comments and keep them nice. All right, moving on to number 8, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. And people may go, wow, you have it down at number 8? Well, see what's coming up. Directed by Leonard Nimoy, his first time directing a feature film. Movie came out on June 1st, 1984. Cost $16 million to make. Domestic gross for this movie was $76.5 million. Rotten Tomatoes score, pretty good, 80%. You know, Star Trek 3, I like it. I don't love it. It has great moments, though. And 2 of those great moments involve the Enterprise. I love when they steal the Enterprise out of space dock. And the score by James Horner during that moment is terrific. I also like, even though I was definitely traumatized by it, I do like the scene where they destroy the Enterprise, and in a rare showing of canon, they actually used the same destruct code that they used in Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. So I thought that was pretty cool. In Star Trek II, Spock died saving the Enterprise. In Star Trek III, the Enterprise returned the favor. Doesn't that just get you right here? Number 7 on my list here is Star Trek Beyond. Yeah, Star Trek Beyond, above Star Trek 3. Yep. Directed by Justin Lin, Star Trek Beyond came out on July 22nd, 2016. It cost $185 million to make, the second most expensive Star Trek movie of all time. Domestic gross was $159 million. Worldwide gross, $343 million. It's the lowest grossing of the 3 Kelvin Timeline Star Trek movies. Rotten Tomatoes score, 86%. I like Star Trek Beyond a lot. As a Star Trek movie, it feels more like Star Trek than the other 2 Kelvin Timeline movies. And it's definitely a rebound for the Kelvin films after fans really hated Star Trek Into Darkness. And the other thing about Star Trek Beyond is that Star Trek Beyond feels like a throwback. It feels like a throwback to the original series. For one reason, because when we find out that Krall, the villain played by Idris Elba, was actually the captain of the Franklin, the captain of another starship, that reveal I thought was great, because how many times, especially in the original series, did we see the captain of another starship like lose his mind? Remember Captain Tracy from the Exeter in the Omega Glory? And of course, everybody remembers Commodore Decker from the Doomsday Machine. But I really felt like that really made it feel like a throwback. The other thing was the way the crew was all split up. Like, you have Kirk and Chekhov together, you have Sulu and Uhura together, and you also have Spock and McCoy together. This is where I thought Justin Lin and screenwriters Simon Pegg and Doug Young really got the spirit of Star Trek right with this movie. Because the scenes with Spock and McCoy, played perfectly by Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban, they just really got these guys. They really got the dynamic of their relationship, the way they were going at each other, but they really did care about each other, love each other, and respect each other. All right, moving on. Number 6 on the list here, on the Movie Mantz rank and file list, is Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, directed by Nicholas Meyer, released on December 6, 1991. Cost $27 million to make. Domestic gross was $75 million. Rotten Tomatoes score 82%. 2 Oscar nominations for makeup and sound effects editing. And after Star Trek V dropped the ball, Star Trek VI was a return to form. That's more like it. This was the movie that the full original cast needed to go out on a high note, and they definitely did. When you got to the end of the film, second star to the right, straight on till morning, where no man, where no one has gone before, and the signatures at the end. Overall, though, I felt that Star Trek VI was solid, above average, definitely one of the better Star Trek movies, but still not great. Even though Nicholas Meyer was back, and Nicholas Meyer did direct what maybe the greatest Star Trek movie of them all. We'll have to, stay tuned, and we'll find out if that's actually true. But I still felt like the cast members, they just seemed a little tired. There was something, that just fell a little bit short with Star Trek VI. But I did like that it too was a metaphor. And, the best Star Trek movies and the best Star Trek episodes were always metaphors. And this one was a metaphor for the fall of communism. Moving on to number 5. Number 5 is Star Trek 2009. Yes, the J.J. Abrams directed reboot of Star Trek, released on May 8th, 2009. Cost $150 million. First time a Trek movie ever got that high on a budget. Domestic gross $258 million, worldwide gross $386 million. Rotten Tomatoes score was 94%. This movie is terrific. It's great. I love this movie. It was an Oscar winner for best makeup. 3 more Oscar nominations for sound mixing, sound editing, and visual effects. It was a SAG Award nominee for Best Acting Ensemble, and it was a Producers Guild Award nominee for Best Picture. Wow. This movie, Star Trek 2009, is the real deal. It's not just a great Star Trek movie. It's a great movie, period. And in some ways, it's a Star Trek movie for people who maybe have never seen Star Trek before, don't usually like Star Trek. But I loved how they set up the alternate timeline. They really freed it from what was then 43 years of canon. And after the Star Trek TV shows got stale, and after the Star Trek movies got stale, this movie was fresh, it was fun, it was vibrant, it was confident, it was just a breath of fresh air, and I just loved the hell out of it. Moving on to number 4, Star Trek First Contact, directed by Jonathan Frakes. Release date November 22nd, 1996. Cost $45 million to make. Domestic gross $92 million. Worldwide gross $146 million. Rotten Tomatoes score 93%. 1 Oscar nomination for Best Makeup. This is obviously the best Next Generation Trek movie by far. And like The Wrath of Khan, it too was inspired by Moby Dick. But this movie has it all. It really has something that the fans really loved. A, time travel, and B, the Borg. And great supporting cast with Alfre Woodard and James Cromwell. And it just was a terrific movie. And like the Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, this movie featured the Enterprise cast as a fish out of water in the 21st century. This movie has it all: action, heart, and humor. Number 3, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Directed by Leonard Nimoy, release date November 26, 1986, cost $21 million. Domestic gross was $109 million. Rotten Tomatoes score here is 85%. 4 Oscar nominations for cinematography, sound effects editing, and score. Everyone knows Star Trek IV as the one with the whales. This is the most accessible Star Trek movie, at least up until the Kelvin films. And it was like, even people who don't like Star Trek or have never seen Star Trek, they still know this movie, just like they know The Trouble with Tribbles. So Star Trek IV is to the feature films what The Trouble with Tribbles is to the original series. Everyone could get into it. Everybody remembers it. And it was so much fun that, like, my mom loved Star Trek IV, and she is not a Star Trek fan. The character dynamics were great. I love how everyone was split up, and everyone had their moment to shine. It had humor, it had heart, it was metaphorical about, you better take care of your wildlife now or you're going to regret it in the 23rd century, if not sooner. Okay, number 2 on the list. This is going to get some controversy. Star Trek, the motion picture. Yeah, okay, I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, that's way too high. That movie is boring. Just wait a second. So the movie is directed by Robert Wise. Robert Wise directed a Star Trek movie, the director of The Sound of Music and West Side Story. I mean, he worked on Citizen Kane. He was an editor on Citizen Kane directing a Star Trek movie. Released December 7th, 1979. Cost $45 million to make. Domestic gross was $82.6 million. Rotten Tomatoes score 42% with reservations, okay? But 3 Oscar nominations for art direction, visual effects, and musical score. And boy, oh boy, did Jerry Goldsmith deserve that nomination. One of the very best film scores of all time. Now, I always had a soft spot for the motion picture. It's the first Star Trek movie I saw in theaters, and the special effects are terrific. The movie feels very cinematic, and for many, many years, no other movie, no other Star Trek film looked as cinematic as Star Trek the Motion Picture. And the reason I have it at number 2 on my list is because no Star Trek movie has aged better than the motion picture. Yeah, some people say it's slow. Some people say it's boring. The trip around the Enterprise was boring. The trip through V'Ger was boring. You know what? I don't think those scenes are long enough. Watching the trip around the Enterprise and seeing Kirk all happy to see his beloved starship again. The trip through V'Ger, that the visual effects were great. The musical score was great during those moments. And Star Trek has always been a metaphorical show. It has been philosophical. It has been aspirational. It has been provocative. Star Trek the Motion Picture wasn't Star Trek's answer to Star Wars. It wasn't supposed to be. It was Star Trek's answer to 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is a movie that made you think. Yeah, a lot of people were expecting a big battle movie like Star Wars, but they got something that was right in line for Star Trek. Now, the reason why this movie has moved up on my list is because one of the things I really didn't like about the film over the years was the characters were not the way I remembered. They were not the characters that I loved in the original series. Kirk is very short-tempered. He kind of pulls a dick move over Decker to get the Enterprise back. You don't really know what Spock's motives are. Kirk and McCoy are arguing all the time, but, they did argue a lot in the original series. But it made sense. Like, I got it. Because if the motion picture is supposed to take place 2.5 years after the end of the 5-year mission, so they've all gone off on their separate ways. Spock's been off on Vulcan trying to purge himself of emotion with the Kolinar. McCoy grew a beard, started a private practice. Kirk took a desk job. So now they're all coming back together. They have to get used to each other again. And they have to find their place on the new Enterprise. I mean, Kirk doesn't even know where Turboshaft 8 is on this thing. So he doesn't feel comfortable. But dramatically, chronologically, it made sense that the characters would act this way. And I think it makes for a better film. Sure, the movie is basically a very big budgeted and overly long remake of the classic Trek episode The Changeling, but that's okay. I think this movie is fantastic. The motion picture is a great movie and a great Star Trek film. Wait, time out. We interrupt this list to bring an honorable mention. No best of Trek movie list will be complete without Galaxy Quest. So number 1.5 on my list is Galaxy Quest. Released December 25th, 1999, cost $45 million to make. Domestic gross, $71.6 million. Worldwide gross, $91 million. Not nearly as successful as DreamWorks wanted it to be, but the Rotten Tomatoes score was 89%. And can you just imagine if they made Galaxy Quest with the cast of the original Star Trek series? Galaxy Quest is not an official Star Trek movie, but it is a Star Trek movie in spirit, and it's one of the very best. Back to the regular list here. We are at number 1, and of course it has to be Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, directed by Nicholas Meyer, released June 4th, 1982, cost $12 million to make, domestic gross, $79 million, Rotten Tomatoes score, 87%. Look, this is the best Trek of them all. It has it all: action, heart, humor, fun. It's such an amazing film and very emotional. I mean, towards the end, the scene between William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy when Spock is dying. I mean, that scene is still powerful almost 40 years later. And, you know, say what you like about the iconic moment, you know, Khan, but William Shatner's performance in Star Trek II, I think this is his finest hour. I think William Shatner was just brilliant. The best thing he's ever done is in Star Trek II. The movie's very poetic in the way it is sort of an allegorical version of Moby Dick and A Tale of Two Cities. And amazing score, one of the very best musical scores ever by James Horner. After Star Trek, the motion picture, you know, people, a lot of fans especially, weren't crazy about it. This was the Star Trek movie that everyone was waiting for. I remember a review that I read back in 1982. The review said, now that's more like it. And that is more like it indeed. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, still the greatest Star Trek movie of them all. Thank you so much for joining me on my very, very first episode of Rank and File. And make sure you come back soon for a brand new episode. Until then, live long and prosper.